Hello, 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 my magical friends. Oh, I didn't refill my water. Okay. So I said a couple days ago, and I didn't get a chance to come online and talk about sigils. So I am going to talk about that right now. We're going to have a little quick mini class, hopefully 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so. So let's talk about what sigils are. Now, last month I went over and showed you how to create what a sigil is, how to create a sigil, the different forms that you can use to create it, like the sigil wheel or the squares or transferring it into numbers. You guys have the availability to download the $5 sigil pack off of the website if that's something that you still needed. But I wanted to talk a little bit more. Give me a hey when you join me. I wanted to talk a little bit more about sigils, in being that a lot of people correlate sigils to the symbols, right? And we talked about, again, last month, we talked about all the different types of sigils that there are when it comes to written form. But a lot of people don't recognize or realize that sigils do not need to be in written form. And we use sigils a lot more often than we give credit to ourselves, I think, in a lot of areas. So I'm going to explain two different things about sigils today. Again, the written sigils, the symbols, I love working with candle magic. You can, put them on the bottom of your shoes to cast spells while you're walking. You can use them as you're cleaning. You can use them as you're putting on your makeup or your moisturizers and all that good stuff. Hello, right? So we can do that when it comes to a written sigil. But what about not having to write your sigil down? So there is something that is called, and those of you that are in the sister circle understand this and recognize what I'm talking about, there are called spell delays, right? So you create your spell cast to a certain point and you put it into a movement, so that, because some spells we need to cast within the presence of another person. And a way that you can do that is with spell triggers or spell delays, but you can also do it with sigils. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. This is going to be verbal sigils and motion sigils, which some of you may not have ever heard of, right? So if a sigil, what is a sigil? First off, let's go back to that. A sigil basically is just a code of magic. That's all it is. It's a coded form of magic. Just like that Christmas show with My Christmas Story, right? Where he gets his drink your Ovaltine, right? Your spy ring or whatever. It's a code that you figure out. Well, a sigil is the same thing, no matter whether it's written, if it's verbal, or if it's action, okay? It's a code of magic. It's a phrase or an intention phrase, an intention phrase that has been broken down and then reassembled in a new way. Shush, hold on, sorry. There. Broken down and then reassembled in a new way, and that makes it coded, right? That process of coding it actually, here we go. There we go. That process of coding it, of breaking it down, looking at it and reassembling it, actually brings it into our subconscious mind. That allows our subconscious mind to understand and work with that symbol, phrase, or action that we have coded for our magic. When we then invoke or we activate that sigil, then we're activating it in the subconscious level. We're activating it with our subconscious mind. We're bypassing our logical, conscious, doubting, analyzing portion of ourselves, which allows us just to step right into the magical aspect of it, which is an amazing thing to be able to do. So that is why I always invite everyone to create your own sigil. And I know that there are tons of them that you can Google search, and to Google search a sigil and to use that just like any other spell. I always say your spells, your recipes, everything should be your own, because you need to have emotional connection to it. And whatever somebody else has written or put together is based on their emotional response to that time, that moment in time and the ingredients that they're using. So that's why I always suggest to use, if you're not sure in your own footing in the beginning, use other people's spells or other people's sigils as a starting point for yourself until you get into the feel of being able to create it yourself, because that's where true power up comes from, when it's from your emotional connection, your emotional response to what you're doing. So that's why I always suggest and invite you to create your own sigils. So if a sigil is simply a coded form of spell casting, right? A coded form of magic. It's a coded way to cast a spell. Then that means that any form of coded intention becomes a spell. And that's where it gets exciting, right? So let's talk about first verbal sigils. Let me know if you've heard of verbal sigils before, because some people it's a completely new concept. Other people are like, oh, yep, I've heard of that. So, you know, I get kind of a fair quantity of each of them. But I want to make sure that you have all the tools available to you to be able to work your magic and craft your practice to a way that you go, yes, that absolutely feels right for me. And then it takes you to a whole new level of self-empowerment. And that's what I am all about here for you, right? So let's talk about so when we make any sigil, we first start out with our power phrase, our phrase of intention. What is it that we want, right? And then we move into creating it in physical form. And here we're going to create it in a verbal form, which then brings it into physical. And then we're going to talk about movement, which brings it obviously into physical because it's movement from our body. So let's say that your intention is that you want to make new friends. Okay, so your power phrase or your intention phrase is going to be, new friends come easily to me. Okay, and I've got a blank piece of paper here in my little Witchful Ways pen that I'm going to write that down. So it is new friends. I'm going to take this step by step for you. New friends come easily to me. Okay, so new friends come easily to me. That's going to be our intention or our power phrase, because our intention is we want to make new friends. So new friends come easily to me. So now what you're going to do with this, rather than going ahead and crossing out your doubles and all that kind of stuff, right? You're going to start playing with the letters and you're going to start rearranging those letters. So let's say if I rearrange them, I'm going to end up with oops, there's no U. Yeah. Okay. If I rearrange them, they're going to look something like that. Okay? So now I could use this as a spellcasting phrase. I can use this as something that sounds right, like when you're doing your spellcasting. This becomes that. So this would be, you could actually say it out, spell it out and say it out. Fiam rind wen silyam sect. Does that not sound fabulous as a spell all in of its own, right? But you could go back to here and you could cross out your duplicate letters, right? Which is going to leave you with E, lots of E's in there. I, O. Okay, which is going to leave you with NEWFRIDSCOMLYT. Okay, so if you take this and you cross out your duplicate letters, you're going to end up with these letters here, right? So if you don't want to make it a whole phrase like this, you can end up with these letters here. Now you can take these letters and you can rearrange just those letters, okay, into something different. Okay, So if I rearrange these letters into something different, they become, I'm not sure if this is backwards to you, and I'm sorry if it is. They become this here. And if I want to say this out, I would probably say Rend Liscum Feet. Rend Liscum Feet. That's your spell right there. Now, how do you activate it? Right? Because usually when you're activating your spells, right, when you're activating them, written and activated, you do it the same as you would a symbol sigil, however you normally do that. But what's really nice with these, with your verbal, is chanting, right? So if you get it down to this or this, and you get it into a phrase that you can get into a chanting with it, right? Get in that kind of trance-like chant, you've created an entire spell cast right from your verbal sigil. Now, super easy, right? Super simple. Any intention, just like you would a statement. Now remember that your sigils always need to have a power phrase or your intention phrase that is in the positive aspect, right? You don't want to talk about what you don't want. I always use the analogy of wanting to manifest a car for yourself, right? Oh, I'm going to love this car. I'm going to love this car. I'm going to love this car, but I hope it's not the green one. This car, I'm going to look so good. I'm just going to feel good. I'm going to feel it in my hair, but I hope it's not the green one. I hope it's the red one. Well, and what is universe hearing? Universe is hearing, new car I'm going to get. I love it. And it's green. That's all they hear. Because they don't hear the negative words, the negative aspects, the don't, can't, shouldn't, right? Wouldn't kind of things. So make sure you're writing your sigil phrases in the positive form. And also make sure you're writing them in the current, not in the future or the past, right? So that's why we wrote, when we said, well, what do we want to do? We want to make new friends. That is our goal, to make new friends in this, right? So that's why our power phrase or our intention phrase was new friends come easily to me. Because that's in the here and now. And it's in a positive aspect. There's no way to spin that any other way, right? So that is a positive and current. Yes, so that is a super easy way to create your abracadabra, right? Because abracadabra is nothing but a power cast spell word that somebody else created. That's all it is. So you can create your own spell words. Now, you can create instant spells like this, right? It's an instant spell. You can create instant spells with your verbal and your motion sigils that we're going to talk about in just a minute for things that you do a lot and often. So if it's maybe calming your anxiety, right? I am tranquil and calm. May be what your power intention is. And you can do this. So every time you get into an anxious kind of thing, you can bring yourself an instant spell that will release that energy to yourself for being tranquil and calm in the moment. Right? Okay. So super simple, super fun, super easy. A lot of people just kind of think right over this one. And I'm like, this is huge. Like, I do a lot of spell casting this way. So let's talk about then, we talked about written sigils, and now we've talked about verbal sigils and things that you can create. So when you're doing things over and over and over again, spells that you may do continuously, such as opening up for divination, right? You could create your verbal sigil. You could create that and use that every single time that you're going to begin your divination session, so that you're opening up to, right? Things like that. So things that you're going to do repetitively. Okay. So now let's talk about motion. How many of you have ever thought about motion sigils? You guys know that I always talk about dancing and movement. It raises energy. It clears energy. It does everything that it raises vibration. It clears the room of unwanted energies. It spits out all that extra gunk that may be connected to your aura that's not yours. It just flings it back out, right? Like, movement is so essential when it comes to balancing, cleansing, and spell casting, I think. Okay. And I often often take on that very theatrical witchiness, right? When I am casting a spell, when I am working my own rituals, my personal rituals, there is a lot of feeling and thought and movement to it, okay? To where it reminds me of almost like the Hollywood, kind of, kind of thing, but there is a lot that goes into it. And movement is very, very powerful. So movement sigils, of course, are very, very powerful. So again, you're going to come up with your power phrase, whatever that may be for you. Your movement sigils can be very minute things, and they can be very, right, like whole dance routine kind of things. One of the things that I like to use, because when I was growing up, I had a friend whose parents were deaf, and we learned, I was in 6th grade, and we learned how to, at that time they had Christmas concerts, right? The kids put on Christmas concerts for the whole school. And our 6th grade class sang Silent Night, and then as our song, and then my friend at the time, her name was Sherry, her parents were deaf, so she taught our entire class how to sign the song in sign language along so that we could sing it and sign it at the same time so that her parents could enjoy it as well. And I think both of her parents were deaf. But anyways, it was this amazing thing. Like, it opened up this amazing thought process to me at the time, being in 6th grade, going, this is awesome. People talk to each other without saying a word. Like, to my sixth grade brain, right? 11, 12 years old, whatever that is. And I was like, this brings on a whole new thing for me. This brings on a whole new aspect and concept of how I can do things, how I can cast my spells, how I can, you've seen the Hollywood things, right? Where the witch just walks up and all of a sudden just goes, or the little winky winky nose thing, right? Those are all forms of movement sigils. Plain and simple. So sign language is an amazing way to figure out some of the symbols or some of the signs and use those within your crafting. So for example, let's say that you want to cast your circle, but you don't want to go through and do this whole like ritualistic thing. I cast my circle in moments because I use sign language for the whole thing. So it is a form of movement sigils that automatically power up and cast my circle for me by using a lot of the ASL, the sign language movements and hand gestures, right? So I don't have to walk around widdershins or, docile or anything. I don't have to do any of all that because I brought it down into an activated sigil. So I know that every time I make this movement, my circle is cast for me, and I am absolutely protected in that moment, right? For whatever reason you may want to be casting a circle. I don't do it every time that I spell cast or work ritual, 2 different things, right? But it is something that sometimes, especially if I'm outdoors, like if I go to a park in the back kind of wooded area or something, and you're not sure what's around there, what's there, I will cast a circle. But I don't have to spend 10, 15 minutes doing it, right? Because I have my simple hand gestures that do it unnoticeable to a lot of people, right? Okay. So let's say also, so that's talking hand gestures when you want to do something like that. But let's talk about it in the sense of working with spell casting. So let's say your spell cast is, or your intention is that you want to make money, right? Like, who doesn't? Like, you want to make money. You want to have money coming in every day. So your intention is going to be, your power statement maybe, I create money every day, right? That's here now, that's current, and it's positive in the positive aspect, right? I create money every day. So if you would want to put that into maybe some kind of actual movement for yourself that maybe you can do in the shower as you're getting dressed, or as you're brushing your teeth, or at the end of the day, or waiting in the elevator to go up to the 32nd floor of your work, I don't know, you could maybe break it down. So if you're using I create money every day, the I create part, what movement could you do for I create? when I think of I create, I always go back to Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway, where he makes fire, right? He finally gets his fire going, and he's like, that big arm movement, right? Like, I have created this. That's what I think of when I think of I create. So for me, it may be something that has to do with big arm movements like that, right? And then the next thing would be money. So money is, of course, abundance, prosperity. So what would you use for abundance and prosperity? When I think that, I think security, right? Because you know you've got everything that you need. So you've got security. So to me, to have security means to be safe. So when I think of being safe, being protected, I think of the superhero pose. Everybody knows the superhero pose, right? Like hands on the hip, chest out, chin up, right? So far I would have this going into a power pose. That's my portion of it, okay? And then the last part would be something, the last part of your power phrase is every day. So that means it needs to be something that's repetitive. So now what can you put in there that would be repetitive, which would correspond to your everyday of your power statement? And to me, something repetitive may be going forward and backwards or going side to side, right? That's a repetitive. Going forwards and backwards, I like a little bit better in this scenario. So if I have a movement sigil that is I create money every day, I would start with I create power pose and then my back and forth. That's a whole spell cast right there. That's all you have to do and you've cast your spell for the day. So what do you think about that for sigils? Some people are just blown away by the thought of, I have never thought of it that way. Other people are like, oh yeah, that's great. And I'm going to start, doing that. Most people, I think, already have a little bit of verbal and or movement sigil magic in their everyday workings anyways. So when you think of this doesn't have, you can get creative with it. If you're a musician, you could create your sigils with notes or melodies or riffs, right? Create a whole spell cast that way. You could have a selection of beads or crystals that you lay out and then create jewelry with, right? That's a spell cast piece in and of itself. Knitting patterns even, right? Like all of those kind of things. There's really no limit to once you start expanding and thinking about, yes, how can I do this? Because I feel like a lot of us are over, right? When you're been on the path for a while, you're over the ceremonial aspect of things. You are at the point where you are just here to get it done and make sure that it's done right and make sure that it's effective and you get your desired outcome. And we know that it's all about your connection to it and your intention pushing out. So that means that verbal and movement sigils can be huge to round out your practice. And you can do things, again, in the presence of other people, being very discreet about it. Nobody's none the wiser that you just, threw out that whatever it was spell that you just did for yourself or for somebody else. Okay, that is my sigil aspects. If you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me or post in the Living a Magical Life Facebook group and I'll be sure to respond. Have a wonderfully magical rest of your day.